And thanks for staying with us here on Morning Live. Now, the South African Communist Party has called for a moratorium on retrenchments. The call was validated by the party's support of the COSATU nationwide march that took place across the country yesterday. Meanwhile, the country's economy is under immense pressure, and averting job losses both in the private and public sectors is proving to be quite difficult. And just the implementation of stage 1 load shedding by Eskom, the country's economy loses R1 billion per day, and the implementation of stage 4 brings a loss of R4 billion to the economy per day. Mapaila, the first Deputy Secretary General of the SACP, unpacks that stance, and he's here to give us further clarity and practical insight into how they plan to follow through on this call. Thanks so much for coming through.
Thank you very much, Second, and good morning as well.
Mr. Mapaila, it's a tough economic climate. These are difficult times. You've called for a moratorium as the SACP on retrenchments. But explain to us why at this time, and also how long do you expect this moratorium to be in place for?
Firstly, because we face a serious job crisis, a job loss crisis, a crisis of unemployment as well. And we feel that if you allow companies to retrench workers as and when they are under pressure, will deepen the crisis. And we think it's very possible. You'll remember we made a call and we worked with our comrades at the Communication Workers Union to stop retrenchments here at SABC for workers here. And initially the management was believing that it's impossible to do it. But later on, everyone agreed, and workers' jobs have been preserved. We think this is the same attitude we can expect from different sectors in the public sector as well as the private sector. For instance, in the mining sector, which have announced different series of retrenchment packages for workers in different mines, we have seen, for instance, various minerals, including gold particularly, doing very, very well. But they have not reversed those announcements. That shows that there's no commitment, particularly from the mine bosses or one sector of the economy, to play ball to try and avert the deepening crisis. So we think it's possible. We can develop some mechanisms using data on, for instance, profit margins from various companies, that if you sustain a particular level of profit margin, for instance, there's no need to even think of retrenching workers. But the bosses have got insatiable appetite for making more money, so they don't care about workers. If they see an opportunity to make more money, they cut off workers and make more money, which is a part of the problem. That's why there needs to be job security in this country, in this economy. Otherwise, we'll not be able to turn around the corner.
But business people will tell you that they don't go into business to be philanthropic. They go into business precisely because they want to make profits. They will do what they need to do to maximize those profits. So where do you draw the line in terms of what you can and cannot interfere with in that regard?
That's true, but obviously it's an irresponsible model of a business, like the one that is followed sometimes by Eskom, where in fact Eskom loses money, for instance, on the IPP project, for instance, as part of its a business model. But business or capital as a whole, that's its major weakness. It doesn't care about the well-being of the people. That is why that system must always be tempered with policy-wise, as well as from a humanitarian perspective. You target their profits, you make sure that you encroach in that particular space, because willingly it will be difficult for them to do so. That is why you can come and say, we prescribe here, if you make so much profit, you cannot, for instance, take adverse decisions against workers, maybe for a particular number of years, because you need to make appropriate decisions that will also sustain jobs and also grow the economy. And in fact, in other areas, we have found that there's a correlation between looking after workers and growing the business as well. So, but one monolithic model of just making profit has not been useful. I think, but ultimately, we believe as Communist Party that the system of socialism, which will defeat the objective of profit and make the objective of social needs as an objective of production will be the main solution, the final solution. But as we live under capitalism now, these are some of the measures that we can suggest.
So you mentioned Eskom. As the SACP, have you done any sort of research into the claims that Eskom, in fact, is bloated in terms of its staff complement, and people talking about there needing to be massive numbers of retrenchments in order for Eskom to function optimally, because there are just too many people for what is being done? Have you done any research into that?
Yes, we've done some work in that. What evidence we have is not much bloated at the level of the workforce. We think that Eskom still requires the necessary workforce that they have. In fact, they may require more. What has been bloated is the senior executive level. At some point, I think they were hovering about 3-4 years ago, they were hovering at about 200. They shoot up to over 600 executives. We don't know what they are doing. So that's where they increased the higher level of executive pay within Eskom by just possibly, this was the crony system at play during the massive period where Eskom was looted, violated in the most despicable way. So people were just appointed to very senior executive and earning huge salaries with huge benefits and so forth. But at the workforce level, actually, you may even need more workers for Eskom.
So in that regard, would you say that there is a case for retrenchments at Eskom?
There's no case for retrenchment as Eskom at the moment, particularly given what we have said in terms of skills capacity. You need the review of the skills level that are required. Of course, particularly from those executives that were said to be appointed based on merit on some of the skills. Of course, some of them have got huge skills, were shifted aside because wrong people were appointed for particular reasons, and they are there, but their skills are not being properly utilized.
But if you're saying that the senior executive level is bloated, then what do you expect Eskom to do about that? Should they just, maintain the status quo because you don't want to see retrenchments, or should they actually go ahead and do what they need to do? You
can redeploy them to various plants, for instance. Some of it's over-concentration, poor management or poor supply of particular skills in one area, over-concentrated, which sometimes is not needed. And in the most needy areas, you find that there are no appropriate skills or executive leadership. For instance, if you look at the mistakes that have been, the errors that have been committed at the construction of Medupi, which is supposed to be functioning very well, one of our most expensive Eskom plant, where were the top engineers that we have, for instance, to have actually indicated that this thing is not working appropriately or is not being constructed appropriately? At the moment, that thing is working at less than 50%. So it's
where
just
are
a
they?
Brand new institution.
You are suggesting that Eskom should simply just redeploy some of the top executives that they have. Are you suggesting they do that to specialized plants like Medupi, Kusile, even if they may not have the requisite skill sets?
Yeah, some of the best electrical skills in the world are based here, and they're not being utilized. And I think they're acknowledged all over the world. And I think that one of the problems with Eskom was the privatization model using the IPP system, that is an independent power producer system, and therefore using this power purchasing procurement system directly to these independent power producers. So it was a model to privatize Eskom. And therefore, they also lost some of the top executives with high skills into the IPP sectors because Eskom guaranteed to purchase from the IPP side. And they were almost funding that particular space, which was unacceptable. Yeah.
2 points. You say that the IPPs, Eskom is actually incurring losses as a result of that.
Of course.
I'll ask you to explain that, one. And two, there has been questions around who owns these IPPs, and the information hasn't been quite forthcoming. And now you saying that some top engineers have actually left Eskom to go and play in that space. Does that mean that you know who some of the owners are?
Well, we can ask the minister to disclose because he's the one that signed, Minister of Energy, Jeff Radebe.
Fair enough, but you just said...
No, I'm just saying he's the one that signed the agreement. There should be no problem because those are the agreements signed with the public entity.
No, but do you know?
They should be disclosed.
You said 2 minutes ago some of those engineers left.
Of course, we know some of them when they left the employ of Eskom because they were needed on the other side and they were availing their skills. But their skills were expensive. And Eskom was a willing buyer of those expensive skills. That is why they paid more to procure, to buy IPP projects and sell the same thing at a much cheaper price. So they were incurring loss. It was a wrong model. That is why one of our demands, by the way, is that retrospectively, Eskom must be able to claim back that money or else be given shareholding in those IPPs that they guaranteed the jobs, because, I mean, the money, which runs into billions of rands. I mean, this is reckless expenditure of public funds. It's unacceptable. So it is this obsession with the privatization model, because the IPPs, it's a form of privatization. So it's more or less like the Eskom comes and give me money to go and establish an institution which they'll also guarantee to buy from me at a higher price than what they will also sell in the market. I mean, that's terrible.
Mr. Mapaila, the SACP is part of the Tripartite Alliance. So were you not aware of this? Were you not aware that the agreements were going to be signed with the IPPs by Eskom? Because I have to question that, given that at the time there was a lot of talk about nuclear and a lot of opposition towards a nuclear procurement. So why then is it that you are sounding right now that you didn't know about this?
No, the IPP was a project that was put on the table. We have rejected that. We felt that if business wants to participate in the construction of electricity and so forth, they should do so, and when available, anyone can use it. So there's no problem with that. What we're disagreeing with was the government or the Eskom's guarantee of buying IPPs, and itself, because IPPs were largely about the renewable energy space. And we're basically saying Eskom itself must lead in the investment of renewable energy rather than fund people to establish renewable energy and they buy it expensively than the existing form of electricity.
So what was the counter-argument?
Well, the counter-argument was on the basis that we needed to multiply. We had entered the earlier period of load shedding, and big capital came in and said, privatize this thing, we'll give you an alternative. And they were not giving an alternative. They were simply saying, well, they were almost blackmailing the country that will provide something, but you have to guarantee buying from us. They wanted to participate in the grid. But in a capitalist society, for instance, if you've got a product, if it's a good product, anyone will come and have it and buy into it. So this thing was opposed. That is why the previous minister didn't sign it. When the new minister came in, Comrade Khatebe, the big business pressurized him, and he also immediately says, no, this thing was on my table. He signed it off. Workers have expressed a view on this, and we supported them, and we took this matter up into the alliance, and we have been debating this. Unfortunately, those discussions didn't take place appropriately between the ministry or the minister and the workers, particularly NUM and COSATU. As a result, workers ultimately decided to put a Section 77 to apply for a strike through NEDLEC, which is what the strike that we have yesterday, and we support that particular strike. We think it was an important action so that ministers of state, they must appreciate and understand when workers are raising concerns and allow themselves to have space to discuss those concerns and not run away.
Let me come back to asking you about who owns these IPPs. You said the minister should divulge that information. The minister has been asked on several occasions, has not been forthcoming with that information. So if you know, why aren't you divulging it?
No, I don't necessarily have to say that I know, but the bottom line is that if it's an agreement between government and any other institution, we can invoke appropriate legislation to force the minister to disclose that.
Why haven't you done that? Because Eskom is a public entity, and I think we would agree that the reason why Eskom finds itself where it is was because of, in the main, poor corporate governance.
That's a diversion.
And here we are hiding information once again.
No, that's a diversion. We're not interested in that aspect. What we're interested in is the model, to deal with the model that is wrong for Eskom, the model of funding private business outside and buy from them higher than what you sell. That's what we're rejecting. Actually, This fallacy that anything private is successful is extremely wrong. In fact, we are encouraging for public spending on public infrastructure and making public infrastructure productive. And Eskom is such one kind of public infrastructure that can be productive. Therefore, there's no need for over-reliance on private capital to do so. Private capital can create its own and facilitate it. People can go and buy.
The inquiries that we are currently having in the country, why do you not think it is important that we actually know who the actors are who are benefiting from this?
There's no problem with us. We are not even saying that it must be hidden. In fact, we can call for the minister to reveal.
Will you do that?
Yes, of course. There's no. I'm making the public call. We'll engage with the president and the minister as well to make that an open knowledge, because it should not be a secret. In fact, if you go to some of the plans that Eskom had signed with some of the contracts, which are IPPs, that will come into either 2020, 2023, and so forth, it's not necessarily a secret. But the point to focus on that is a digression. The critical question is the project itself, the manner in which Eskom is beginning to do business, and that affects now energy security for the country. What we should be looking at is how, for instance, in the meantime, is the Eskom's investment in the renewable space, which is the president announced at the State of the Nation address, which we welcome because we've been making this call. Eskom has been ignoring us. The issue of securing our coal, we're still over-reliant on coal production for our energy. And we have massive coal in this country. How to explore that, how to guarantee that, because at the moment, we don't have problems with coal, but we have problem with energy. That's where the problem is, how to supply that coal, because we took a wrong policy and shifted. In the past, all coal mines were linked and owned by Eskom. Were linked with Eskom and owned by Eskom. We stopped that particular policy. We need to revert to that so that we can guarantee energy security for the country.
Final question, we're out of time. Your statement, you made a statement about PAC leader Robert Sobukwe that has basically, got a lot of flack directed at you. And you said that Sobukwe was favored by the apartheid regime. Would you care to explain that?
Yeah, I think this thing, I discussed this yesterday at KFM extensively, and I don't want to go into that because there's been no proper debate. What I was, in fact, I can't represent the apartheid regime. What I was expressing was a view of the apartheid regime, and I've got evidence to back it up, that they treated him as a political prisoner, and they treated our leaders as slaves and terrorists because they were communists. That's the point I made.
And just a final one, yesterday, Terra Lekota, Musiwa Lekota, I should say, of COPE, basically saying that President Cyril Ramaphosa was a sellout. And Floyd Chibambo of the EFF then went on to say, the SACP may have had some knowledge of this. Do you know anything about that?
No, we don't know anything about it. In fact, we think it was completely nonsensical of what Musiwa Lekota said yesterday. It was just politicking. We reject it.
So was it the first time you heard of it?
Yeah, it was the first time.
You never heard of it before?
No.
All right. Mr. Mapaila, thank you so much. Thanks so much for stopping by. Solly Mapaila, the first Deputy Secretary General of the South African Communist Party, explaining their position as an organization and a party on a call for a moratorium on job losses. We're into news time, so it's over to Leanne for